Well, here's the final part of my introduction to the holistic, spiritual, magical, and occult world. Now we're going to get into. See, most people, when they think spirituality, they think really the hippie trippy, far out liberal thing, or they might think of the Christian mystic who deals with Hildegard of Bingen or something. But spirituality encompasses all aspects of life, all forms. They may be things that, you may not care for some of this, but they're there. And to know about them and to acknowledge them at least lets you realize that there's balance in the world. You may not care how things are balanced, but at least there's balance there. And, honestly, I don't really know if any of us really know from a higher viewpoint why things are the way they are. So, continuing to look at types and groups of these, we're going to get into some of the more what you might call left wing, not left wing, but right wing or left handed um, energy types, if you want to call it. Um, I am also notorious for incredibly silly scientific words like thingamajiggy. So if you feel like laughing, go ahead. I've talked about religious, non religious, ceremonial, wizardry, but you've got groups from the left hand path. They're considered magical, but they also can be considered religious to a point. You've got variations of the quote classic Satanism, the medieval Satanism that the church was so freaked on because a lot of times people practiced that in the Middle Ages because it was the only way to try to break the power of the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church was the only power available. And if you didn't fit into their, and this was historically, but if you didn't fit into their narrow little um, ideals, you you were in trouble. So a lot of people did that. Nowadays, you've got Anton LaVey's Church of Satan and the Satanic Witchcraft. I have to admit, I tried reading his book and I just laughed very hard. But I've got a couple friends across the country through the Gray School that take it very seriously. So it's just not my thing. You've got an offshoot of LaVey's, the Setian tradition. You've got Thelema, which they tend to hang out with the chaos magicians and the left hand path people. A very dear friend of mine is devoted to Thelema, but she's using it slightly different than a lot of people do. You have got, I remember listening to Christian fundamentalists he was talking about all the evils in the magic world, but he delineated versions of Satanism I hadn't thought of. You've got kids, you've got satanic forms where kids dress up and they have all the tools because they want to freak mommy and daddy out, or they want to freak the church out, or they're tired of being picked on, so they want everyone in their surrounding area to be scared of them. So it's more a freaky thing. You do have my first astral warrior mentor told me there are biker gangs that use the trappings of Satanism as an intimidation game. The problem is it has been used by drug lords in different parts of the world, variations of it, maybe not so much the LaVey type Satanist, but this concept of the more satanic sacrifice and stuff for drug lords and stuff around the world. Then you've got the psychotics and serial killers who just incorporate the occult into what they do. It doesn't mean that it's like, oh geez, I could give you thousands of it's likes and it's not really worth it. I mean, Charles Manson. You've got um, then sort of drifting away. You've got something that's somewhat related but not quite the same, chaos magic. Now, chaos magic, the basic concept of chaos magic is basically they're very comfortable with anarchy. You know, they almost, it looks like I'm going to have to do another one after all, but they're very comfortable with anarchy, and they like very much breaking up rigid structures. They're sort of like an extreme version of Discordian pagans. But then moving from that extreme to the chaos magicians, Phil Hine, Peter Carroll, they call themselves chaots. They they sometimes tend to work with the Lovecraftian system. They also, what they've tried to do is they've tried to take the essence of magic and strip it away from the framework. I don't exactly know how it differs from what like the Grayskull stuff is doing, but they are brilliant, at least what I've read. But they also are very. There were groups I heard of years ago called Knights of Chaos and Knights of Night. The Knights, and that's like Knight of Nox. So there are out there. They're trying to counter anything that's there with their own version, or at least they can, if it'll make. And then you move past them into dark or nocturnal magic and witchcraft. I've studied Constantino's nocturnal craft. Michelle Belanger has some wonderful stuff on the Twilight Path. She has a wonderful book based partially on the Tibetan Bardo practices, but the Twilight Path. If you really feel like you're a goth inside, if you're really a goth type but you want to do magic, you've got her Constantino's. What's the other? Raven Digitalis. That's a person. I've got his book over here somewhere and I can't find it. So you've got dark nocturnal magic. It doesn't mean it's evil. It just means that these people, instead of wanting to play in the sunlight, they just happen to like hanging out at night. Or they may be goth. Um, then you've got, and I think I'm going to, I don't really want to put them in the same area, but you've got the conservative and the right wing aspects of these groups. They are not the same as these others, but they can be misused. You've got the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, some forms of ceremonial magic, alchemy. And then when I was studying, most heathens and Teutonic practitioners tended to be right wing conservative. A friend of mine, Bohemia, says that she knows a lot of Teutonic practitioners and heathen who are not now. But and most of the books I've read by Eldridge Thorson and those guys, they do tend to be more right wing in politics. Now, Freemasons, my mentor, my first mentor, loved them. He said that there was an inner core that was a problem because the Freemasons themselves were very benevolent and did good works. It was an inner core that was messing with them. Uh, then you've got middle of the road, nice, boring, middle of the road people. Buddhism, some witches and pagans. Examples are Paul Husson, his Mastering Witchcraft book. Actually, I think that's the first book on witchcraft I ever ran across, and it was back in 8th grade in my math room in junior high, in a little bookshelf. And then you've got Mr. Cahulan or Kirk Cahulan's Order of the Paladin. I would call them middle of the road. They're not too extreme right wing, they're not too extreme left wing. They're so. And I'm still going to have to do another section because we haven't even gotten into the Once Around the World and Approach Carefully category. Sorry about that.